Okay, so before we get started, we're going to set up our journal. We're going to write notes. In fact, let's write GC notes so your teacher knows that's Google Classroom Notes. Equivalent fractions. Using division. Okay, this is TEK 4.3C. Okay, so our first step we want to write down is, how do we find simplest form? Now I want you to just put your pencil down and watch part 1 of the video, and then in the middle you're going to stop and then you're going to copy down what your teacher says. So just right now put the pencil down and just watch, and then we'll take notes. Hi scholars, I'm going to continue teaching you how to determine if two fractions are equivalent using a variety of methods. In my first 3 videos, I showed you how to find them if they're equivalent using pictures and manipulatives and multiplication. In these series, I'm going to show you through division. So let's get started. Hi scholars, I want to talk about equivalent fractions using simplest form today. So we talked about in the other videos that equivalent fractions are fractions that are equal in value. And in my other videos, I explained to you that if you have half and you want to see if it's equivalent to 3/6, you look for a pattern. 2 times 3 is 6, 1 times 3 is 3, therefore they're equivalent. Over here, 1/2, is it equivalent to 4/8? Well, 2 times 4 is 8, 1 times 4 is 4. So we know these are equivalent. Now, if half is equal to 3/6 and half is equal to 4/8, then that means 3/6 and 4/8 are equivalent. But that's hard to prove because 6 times nothing equals 8 and 3 times nothing equals 4. But we know that 3/6 is equal to half, 4/8 is equal to half, so they are equivalent to each other. You can't use the multiplication method with these two. You have to do something called simplest form, which I will show you in a few minutes. Now, simplest form means kind of like what the word simple is. Simple means easy, very little. So when you say something is simplest form, it means it's the fewest pieces and it cannot be divided anymore. So here is a picture. Here is 4/8, here is 3/6, and here is half. I know 3/6 is equivalent to half and 4/8 is equivalent to half. Therefore 4/8 and 3/6 are equivalent to each other. Because from all of these, the simplest form is half, because if you look, it's only 2 pieces, and one of those pieces is half. So this one has 3 pieces, this one has 4 pieces. Half is the simplest form because it's the fewest pieces. Here is another example using math manipulatives. As you can see, I have 1/2, I have 2/4, I have 3/6, 4/8, 5/10, and 6/12. Of all of these, half is simplest form because as you can see, it's just like one piece. This is 2/4, but I can still go down to half with that. So if I had 6/12 and someone said, what is 6/12 in simplest form? I have to say half. If I had 5/10 and someone said, what is that in simplest form? It would be half. You're trying to go up this time in using division, which I'll show you. In the other videos, we were going down. If I had half and I doubled it, it would be 2/4. If I had half and I tripled it, it would be 3/6. If I had half, quadrupled it, it'd be 4/8. If I did times 5, it would be 5/10. If I did times 6, it would be 6/12. So if you're multiplying, you are getting more pieces. When you are dividing, you are getting fewer pieces and you are getting simplest form. So the question is, how do we find equivalent fractions? In my other videos, I showed you how to find equivalent fractions through multiplication. So if I had half times 3 times 3, I would get 3/6. If I had half and I did times 4 times 4, I would get 4/8. The other way to do it is through division. you can take this fraction 3/6 and divide by 3 and you get half. You can take 4/8 and divide by 4 and get 1/2. So it's exactly the same thing. There's nothing new. However, when you want to find simplest form, there is an additional step. You can't just choose to divide by anything. You've got to find a common factor. So let's learn that next. Okay, so how do we find simplest form? So if we get a number like 6/12, and I'm asked, what is 6/12 in simplest form? Step 1 would be list the factors of the numerator and the denominator. Now I showed you just a second ago that, the 4/8 we divided by 4, the 3/6 we divided by 3. The 3 and that 4 are factors, and you have to list all the factors in order to determine which one you're going to use. So I like doing the T method. It helps me know when to stop. It puts my numbers in order. And if your division skills are a little weak, there's also a shortcut using this. So you get a lot of benefits out of the T-chart method. But there's also the parentheses method. There's also the rainbow method. If you feel a little bit stronger than this method, you can try the other ones. And I'll show you those in another example. So if I have 6/12, you start with 1. 1 times 6 is 6. So you write 1 here and the higher number here and know that equals 6. Now, if you don't know what factors are, here's the definition. It's numbers that multiply with another number to make the product. So if 6 is my product, my factors are 1 and 6 because 1 times 6 equals 6. So once I'm done with 1, then I move on to 2. Well, 2 times 3 equals 6. After 2, I go to 3. But if you notice, 3 is over here, which means once you jump over to the other side of the T-chart, you know you're done and you've listed all the factors. So let's do 12. Start with 1. 1 times 12 is 12. 2. 2 times 6 is 12. 3. 3 times 4 is 12. 4. I'm not going to write 4 because I'm over here now, which means I need to stop. So after you do that, your next step will be circle the greatest common factor. So a lot of people end up picking a common factor, but it's not the greatest common factor. So let's look. They both have 1 in common. They both have 2 in common. They both have 3 in common. And they both have 6 in common. The highest number is 6. So 6 is my greatest common factor. A lot of people overlook the greatest common factor by accident and they'll pick the 3. And yes, you can divide by 3 and you will get an equivalent fraction, but you won't get simplest form. So I'll show that an example in a second. Okay, so step 3 is divide by the greatest common factor, which is 6. So what you do is you write your fraction and you set it up and you write divide by 6, top and the bottom. 6 divided by 6, 12 divided by 6. Now this is where the T-chart method is amazing. You set up your division problem. 6 divided by 6. So you take this and you say 6 divided by 6 is, and you create a triangle, which is a 1. So 6 divided by 6 is 1. 12 divided by 6. So you look over here, you create the triangle. 12 divided by 6 is 2. Then you complete your triangle. So there's your answer, 1/2. It's very easy. Now, I'm going to show you what happens if you accidentally don't pick the greatest common factor. Let's say you picked 3. You completely missed the 6 and you picked 3. You will still get an equivalent fraction, it just won't be the greatest common factor. So you can do the triangle method on the T-chart. 6 divided by 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 12 divided by 3. Now look at this one. This one's going backwards. 12 divided by 3 is 4. So 2/4 if you don't pick greatest common factor. And as you can see here, here's 6/12 right here. And if you notice, 2/4 is equivalent to it. But is it the simplest form? No, because there is a much simpler form, which is half, which is what you get when you pick the greatest common factor. So you always want to be careful. Make sure you list all the factors. That's another common error that happens. Sometimes maybe 3 is the greatest common factor on their T-chart because they never wrote the 6 down. They forgot to do that. Like, someone might have 1 times 6 is 6 and 2 times 3 is 6, and they'll have 1 times 12 is 12 and 3 times 4 is 12. They'll never have the 2 times 6. So to them, the 3 seems like the greatest common factor. And so in their mind, they're thinking they're doing it correctly. So when you make sure you go in order, then, it's hard to miss the greatest common factor that way. Let's do another example. Okay, let's find the simplest form for 4/12. Step 1 is list the factors. So I'm going to do the T-chart method. Start with 1. 1 times 4 is 4. 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 3. 3 times nothing equals 4. 4. I notice that 4 is already here, so that would be a stopping point. 12. 1 times 12 is 12. 2. 2 times 6 is 12. 3. 3 times 4 is 12. 4. 4 is already here. 4 times 3 is 12, so there's no point in continuing because I'm on the other side of the T-chart. Step 2, circle the greatest common factor. They both have 1 in common, 2 in common, 3 in common, and 4 in common. 4 is my greatest common factor. Step 3, divide by the greatest common factor. So, divide by 4. Use the T-chart to help you do the division. 4 divided by 4 equals something. 4 divided by 4 equals 1. 12 divided by 4 equals something. 12 divided by 4 equals 3. 1/3 is my simplest form. And if you look right here, here's 4/12. It's also equivalent to 2/6, but that's not simplest form because there's something out there called 1/3 that is simplest and fewest pieces. Now let me show you what you might get as an answer if you don't use the greatest common factor. I want everyone to be aware what happens when you don't use the greatest common factor. You're not going to get simplest form, and that is the goal of what we're trying to achieve here. So let's say you overlook the 4. Let's say when you were listing the factors, you never wrote down 3 times 4 equals 12. Let's say you just did 2 times 6 and you just called it a day. So you're telling yourself 2 is the greatest common factor. So when you do 4/12 divided by 3, divided by 2, 4 divided by 2 is 2, 12 divided by 2 is 6. You get 2/6 as your answer. And if you see here, I had said that earlier, that based on these pieces, 2/6 is equivalent to 4/12, but it's not the simplest, fewest pieces. So please be aware, please be careful when you do the T-chart method or the parentheses or the rainbow method. I like the T-chart method again because if you just go in order and once you see the next number on the opposite side, that's when you know you've listed all the factors. It's very foolproof. Let's do one more example and then I'm going to show you some other alternatives to the T-chart method. Okay, so how do we find simplest form? So in the video, the example I used was 6/12. Simplest form is when you find an equivalent fraction but using the fewest amount of pieces possible. So if we're looking at 6/12, you have to list the factors of the numerator and denominator. Okay, and if you remember, factors are numbers that multiply with another number to make the product. Write this definition down. And so, if you remember when you were making arrays, this is how you found the factors. You made a T-chart. And you found numbers that when this multiplies with this, it makes that. So I always start with 1 and then work my way up to 6. So if I have 1, I know 1 times 6 is 6. Then I go to 2. 2 times 3 is 6. Then I go to 3. Well, if you are writing a number here and you end up on this, you see it that it's on this side as well, then that means you don't have to do any more. That's your stopping point. So I'll show you on 12 how that works too. So 1 times 12 is 12. 2 times 6 is 12. 3 times 4 is 12. And then the next number I would go is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. But if you notice, 4 is over here. So once you go to the other side, that's a stopping point. You know you've listed all the factors. Okay? Then you find the greatest common factor. So in order to do that, sorry, let me just look at my notes. So step 2, so this is step 1. List the factors of the numerator and the denominator. Step 2 is circle the greatest common factor. And greatest means the highest, common is what they both have, and then obviously these are factors. So if you look, they both have 1. You can maybe even put like a little check mark. They both have 1, they both have 2, and they both have 3, and they both have 6. 6 is the greatest common factor. So you're going to take your original fraction and you're going to write it, and then you're going to divide them both by 6 because they both can be divided by it. So you're going to write divided by 6. Now if you don't know your division facts, I use this as a shortcut. So this is 6 divided by 6. So what I do is I start here and I make a triangle. 6 divided by 6 equals 1. 12 divided by 6. So 12 divided by 6 equals 2. So make a triangle there. And then simplest form, your answer is 12. So, or 1/2, sorry. So I know 1/2 is equal to 6/12, and this is simplest form because I use division. We're going to write one more example. Four twelfths. Okay, so let's find what is equal to 4/12 in simplest form. So step 1 is list the factors of the numerator and denominator. So over here, I'm going to write 4 and make a T-chart, and then 12 and make a T-chart. I know 1 times 4 is 4, and I know 2 times 2 is 4. And then if I try 3, 3 doesn't go into 4, because if you skip count by 3s, 3, 6, 9, it doesn't land on 4. So I'm not going to do that. And then I would try 4. Well, I already have 4 over here, so that's a stopping point. Now with 12, 1 times 12 is 12, 2 times 6 is 12, 3 times 4 is 12. And so now the next step is circle the greatest common factor. So they both have 1 in common, they both have 2 in common, they both have 4 in common. So 4 is my greatest number. So now I'm going to write 4/12 divided by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. And then 12 divided by 4 is 3. So there you have it. 1/3 is equal to 4/12, and 1/3 is simplest form. Now I want you to put your pencil down and continue watching the rest of the video. Okay, so now you've seen a few examples, and now I want you to just try one on your own. In this next video, there are 4 examples that I want you to do that the teacher asks you to do for checkpoint. Just pick one, and I want you to just attempt it. Just try it, and then watch how to solve it, and just see if you got it right. And that's it. All right, find these in simplest form. One of these is a little tricky, so don't get alarmed if you get stuck. Just do what you can, press play, and I'll go over them. Okay, let's go over these. So 6/8. Factors of 6 and 8. 1 times 6, 2 times 3. That's my stopping point. 1 times 8, 2 times 4. Nothing times 3 equals 8, so that's my stopping point. Greatest common factor I'm looking is 2. 6 divided by 2 equals 3. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Sorry that it's getting cramped. 2/10. Let's see. Let me just move that over. Alright. 1 times 2 is 2, and that's basically it. 1 times 10 is 10, 2 times 5 is 10, 3 times nothing, 4 times nothing, 5 is over here, so that's kind of my stopping point. 2 is my greatest common factor, divided by 2. 1/5 is my simplest form. Okay, I'm going a little faster. 3/9. 1 times 3 is 3, and that's basically it, because 2 times nothing equals 3. 9. 1 times 9 is 9. 2 times nothing. 3 times 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm over here. Now, I did forget to mention something. If it's an odd number, you know that an even number is not going to go into it evenly. So I don't even have to mess with 2, 4, 6, or 8, because nothing times those numbers are going to equal 9. So that's just a little trick for you to be aware of. Like with tens, factors of 10, you want to see if numbers that end in 0 and 5 try to go into, numbers that end in 0 and 5 try to go into 10. Okay, so back to 3/9. So I'm looking here. 3 is my greatest common factor, divided by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 9 divided by 3 is 3, so 1/3. The tricky one. Let's see. 1 times 4 is 4. 1 times 5 is 5. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times nothing, and then 4 is over here. So that's my stopping point. 2 times nothing equals 5. 3 times nothing equals 5. 4 times nothing equals 5. 5 times 1 equals 5. So that's my stopping point. So, kind of noticed here, their greatest common factor is 1. When the greatest common factor is 1, you basically get your original answer, which means 4/5 is already simplest form. Something to be aware of for future questions. All right, let's do some more examples, but I'm going to change it up a little.